Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Title Update 3 Wild. Today, of course, we're talking Longsword with a new build potential that exists thanks to RNG Talismans back in TU 2.5 combined with the new equipment potential in Title Update 3. I'm going to present you with a fun set leaning into the element boost of the new Bale armor stuff, the new best max DPS set that does engage ever so slightly with the new Omega armor here, as well as another option that's not going to be that far behind but doesn't rely on the RNG talismans if you don't have the ideal setups. But as one important addition to that, we have a multiplayer focused set that's actually going to be the highest effective raw that we're going to have in all these sets today, engaging with the Omega 2-piece. Let's look at that. The set bonuses for the Omega set are these. You have Resonance 1 and 2. Here's the concept. Local and remote resonance alternate, increasing attacker affinity when conditions are met. At level 2, the effect of that is increased, and with the weapons for SNS and Insect Glaive, their special weapon skills are slightly enhanced too. What it actually does is it gives you a bouncing benefit of affinity and raw. So while one's active, the other isn't. For the affinity benefit, you need to be near other players. For the raw benefit, you need to be further away from them. What are the numbers in reality? Well, it's every 90 seconds you have a circle that changes color. So while it's showing blue, this is the distance for close resonance for your affinity increase. For this at the first level or the 2 set, this means 20% affinity, but if you were to have a 4-piece, that'd be 40%, which is obviously crazy. Then after 90 seconds, the circle changes, it becomes red, at which point you need a player to not be within your big red circle to get the benefit of a 2 set or resonance level 1 of 10 raw. Or for the 4 set, resonance level 2 version, that'd be 30, which is obviously insane as well. Overall though, fitting in a 2 set for this bonus isn't that hard, and 20% affinity and 10 raw for that is obviously great. The problem is the reality of how this works. Getting the affinity bonus with other players around is actually easy, right? They're going to be on top of the monster with you. Getting the raw benefit is going to be a lot less reliable because you need people to be away from you. Each bonus is only active half of the fight for 90 seconds, then it swaps. So all of that is to say that, yeah, maybe it looks like 20% affinity and 10 raw. But with it being active half the time and, the distances to other players being important, it's not as potent as it first looks, but it is still very good, obviously. But it does require other players to be around you, whether that's an AI support hunter or an actual player using a hunter, because your palico doesn't trigger or work with this effect. We have a set that engages with this new concept that's not a joke, like it's gonna be our highest effective raw set. But obviously, it only works if you're playing with support hunters or other players, so of course we have a max DPS set for solo play. But yeah, before we get into it, just a quick thank you and credit to Josh as usual. Back in Title Update 2.5, he did a lot of work to understand the RNG talismans, so big credit to him for that, as well as testing and working out the builds for Title Update 3. I am just presenting it today as a longsword player, but as usual, a thank you to the data miner of the information for the RNG talismans, DTL Nor. But with that said, let's get into it. Okay, quick word on your Artian weapon setup for longsword. It is what it's been for quite some time. So whether you have a raw version that has a status like paralysis or blast, or an element that you're not actually committing to, it's the same setup with your production and reinforcement bonuses. Attack boost across the way, with just one being spent on sharpness. That's because we protect our sharpness with razor sharp level 3, and even a bonus level of handicraft if you have that. The way to maximize your setup though is as usual, matching the element weakness of the target. So as an obvious example of Omega, that's weak to thunder. So you bring a longsword that has thunder on it, but again with no commitment in the production or reinforcement to that. This means it's got 225 base raw, the 5% base affinity, and then that nice 300 of the element. Same concept here for the fire weapon, which you'll pull out when you're dealing with an Azula clone as another example. But to specifically highlight the offensive decorations for these weapons, it's crit boost 5 out of 5, then the last slot goes to 3 razor sharp, and again, that extra level of handicraft if you have that. Right, here are the sets we're talking about today. We have the new Title Update 3 max DPS if you're playing in solo, and then we have the true max DPS if you're in a group, which is a crazy thing. We're also going to show the no RNG set version, and a fun set using the Bale element boost. So let's start with that because it's interesting, but ultimately the weakest set of the lot today. The Bale set then uses 2-piece of Bale. This is for the Dark Arts 2-piece. As it states, having recoverable damage increases your elemental attack. And then there's some benefits for Greatsword which has no relevance for us. So while you have red health, the recovery health, you're getting a nice 14% element increase. This is specifically for longsword. There are some changes, like say greatsword, they get a 20% element increase. But most weapons get a 14%, including longsword. Combine this then with Bale gear that has resentment on it, and you're getting a nice little bonus to your raw. But obviously this requires some uptime on red health, which is unreliable. So we only really look at it at like a 20% reliable uptime during a fight. But it's a fun concept and worth taking a look at this new mechanic. Here's the set if you want to give it a try yourself. Is the gamma ray helmet, chest and gloves, of course. And then we go for the bale pieces, the waist and the legs. To make this as effective as possible, you'll need a charm that has attack boost and counter strike on it. This can be achieved with a rarity 6 charm. And this could have decoration slots of just 1 slot, 2 1 slots, or as you can see, a 2 and a 1 slot. Here are the decorations we use to achieve this skill list. Getting us that full latent power, 3 weakness exploit, and then the full counter strike, max might, quick sheath of course. We have the 2 resentment from the gear, bit of evade extender which is really nice for Omega by the way. Benefits of constitution, the 1 adrenaline rush, and burst, and stamina surge. This gives us the 3-piece of the gamma set for Lord Soul for the raw that provides, and increasing latent power's duration. A quick overview of the math for this set then is with this Artian weapon, 225 base raw, 5% more from guts tenacity, and then we add all the flat numbers, counter strike, adrenaline, burst, attack, and then we only get 2 from the 2 resentment with that assumed 20% uptime as it is reasonable. That brings us to 286.25 raw. Multiply that by 32% for white sharpness, and then we're going to work in the affinity, so 30% from maximum might, 33% from latent power 5 with an assumed 66% uptime, only 15% from weakness exploit 3, and 5% from the base Artian brings you to 83% total affinity. Reliable anyway. We've got 5 crit boost, but that's 83% of the time, so on average it's a 33.2% damage increase. Multiply that by a last number, and that brings you to a pretty respectable 503 effective raw, benefiting from the Bale 2 set. So whenever you got that red health, you get this 14% boost to your element, which is a pretty chunky buff for that thing that we're not really committing any effort to. So something fun and fresh, but definitely not meta. So let's get more into meta, starting with a max DPS set for Title Update 3 that isn't engaging with group gameplay. What a strange sentence. There are a bunch of ways you can set this up because of the RNG Talisman. I'll do my best to explain that. But in terms of the RNG Talisman for this set, as usual, you're looking for the attack boost 3 with its 1 offensive decoration slot. This allows you to slot in attack dual 1 to get 4 attack boost total, get the flat raw increase and the 2% increase that provides. Then what you're looking for is 2 more 1 slots and a second skill that's relevant to the skill list we're looking for. That could be, I have here, Adrenaline Rush 1, but it could also be a level of Agitator or a level of Burst instead. If you have any of those combos, but not the 3 1-slot decorations, but instead just 2 1-slot decorations, then instead of the Zoshia legs, you swap in the Zuwu legs, facilitating your worst roll on the Talisman. So I hope that's understandable. Let's look at the set, which is the Gamma Ray helmet and chest, and instead of the gloves as usual, that's where we slot in the new Omega Van Braces for the gloves. They're pretty phenomenal on their own, as you can see. 3 2 decoration slots, the 1 agitator, the fact you get a bonus Divine Blessing, super nice. They're a very solid single slot. Unlike the Ray Waist, which has no decoration slots, but obviously we get latent power and maximum might. And you want 3 pieces of the Gamma set for the Guts Tenacity bonus. But yeah, Zoshia legs in beta, or Zuwu if you have the slightly worse talisman as we said. As a reminder, we're about to cover a no RNG talisman version of this set, so don't freak out if you don't have anything close. Anyway, using those equipment pieces and these decoration slots, we achieve this skill list. So your goal is to get as close to this as possible. So with this setup, we have the full crit boost, the 4 attack boost, and of course razor sharp handicraft. Then we have the full latent power, 3 agitator, full counter strike, max might, quick sheath of course. Then we have the 1 adrenaline rush, weakness exploit, burst, and then all the bonus stuff of divine blessing, recovery speed, stamina surge, and the random element absorption. This gets us our thunderous roar to increase the latent power duration, and guts tenacity for the raw increase bonus there. Let's cover the math for this ideal version of the set, talk about why it's better, and what your other option was. So we have the base raw of 225, multiply that by 7% thanks to 4 attack and guts tenacity, bringing us to 240.75. Then we have the flat numbers from Counter-Strike 3, Agitate 3 with the 65% assumed uptime, Attack 4, Burst 1, Adrenaline 1, gets us to 299.75. Multiply that by 32% for white sharpness, bringing us to 395.6. Then we have the 81% reliable affinity from Maximum Might 3, the Weakness Exploit 1, the base Artian, Agitator 3 with that 65% assumed uptime, and Latent Power 5 with 50% assumed uptime. Could be higher than that, but we're keeping it as fair as possible. So yeah, 81% reliable affinity. With 5 crit boosts, it's a 40% damage increase, but 81% of the time. It's more like a 32.4% overall damage increase. So we multiply that by our last number, and that brings us to 524 effective roll. That is awesome because our last set was 518 effective roll, so it's 6 more. But to be fair to that set, it has the occasional proc of the Legaicrus 2-piece, which definitely is like a smaller gap than 6 effective roll based on that. But this is still better. But I won't leave you hanging. If you want that set that's 518 raw that uses the 2 laggy armor pieces, then that's what this looks like. Those are the armor pieces with a talisman that's a lot easier to achieve. Could be 1 weakness exploit, adrenaline rush, agitator, you just swap it around. Here are the decoration slots that I use to achieve that skill list for that old set that again had 518 raw, but then the benefits of Legaicrus 2-piece. So if you prefer that, there you go. But if you want to use that max DPS set without the RNG talismans, because you don't yet have a solid RNG talisman for either sets we just looked at, then this is your fast alternative. The Ray Gamma for helmet, chest, and gloves. Then the Legaicrus 2-piece for the waist and boots. Then the no RNG talisman is just 3 counter-strike. Super simple. With these decorations, you achieve this skill list with an extra level of stamina surge as a bonus because one of those 2 slots is free. So use it for whatever you like, but I like stamina surge. The short version of the math for this set is this. 225 base raw again, multiply that by 5% thanks to guts. Then we add the flat numbers, bring us to 279.25. Multiply that by the white sharpness, bring us to 368.6. We have the 91% reliable affinity thanks to the things on screen. We still have 5 crit boost here, but 91% affinity. So it's more like a 36.4% damage increase overall. So multiply that by our last number, and that brings you to 503 effective roll, which is obviously competitive with the Bale set we looked at. But with no RNG talisman involved, I think that should appeal to lots of people who maybe weren't playing and farming the 9-star monsters since that dropped. But that brings us to the final set. The group version that is actually the highest effective roll we can achieve with Longsword thanks to Title Update 3. It's ridiculous, and you don't play around the benefits of resonance, they just happen, but the value is immense. We have the Radau Gamma helmet, chest, and waist again, and then we use the new Omega gloves and boots for that 2-piece. For the talisman, we've got the Rarity H charm again with 3 attack and then the 1 offensive slot for that 4th attack boost. Then you want 1 level of a relevant skill. That could be Agitator, Adrenaline Rush like me, or Burst. And you want the 2 bonus 1 slots to actually be able to afford Quick Sheath, which obviously we want. Not a cheap set, but when we're really pushing to the absolute maximum, there isn't room for it. This allows you to achieve the 2-piece of the Omega set for Resonance 1, which alternates between affinity and attack boost when players are near or far from you. So as a reminder how we look at this for the math as we're about to talk about it, you get 10 raw from that version of this benefit, but it's up half the time, so it's more like 5 raw. But then is it actually working or at its full capacity the whole time? No, people are going to be near you a lot of the time. So we put it to a 60% reliable uptime for 5 raw, so it comes out to 3 raw. Meanwhile, for the affinity, which is way more reliable because it needs people to be near you, which is easy as melee, it's originally 20% affinity, but it's up half the time, so it's more like 10% affinity. And we don't give it 100% uptime, we give it 90% uptime, because occasionally people will be too far from you. So it equates to 9% affinity. So you'll see that reflected in the math. Anyway, here are the decorations we use to achieve this skill list. The full crit boost, the 4 attack boost, the razor sharp handicraft, full latent power, counter-strike, max might, quick sheath of course, 2 agitator, 2 evade window, which is nice, the 1 adrenaline rush, weakness exploit, and the burst, and then the bit of bonus, a divine blessing and stamina surge. With this, we get the Resonance 1 with the 2-piece of Omega, as we've said, the 2-piece of Ray Dow to extend latent power, and of course the 3-piece of the Gammas to give us Guts Tenacity. So now we get to the math, which could be complicated, so we're keeping it simple. Rather than doing 2 sets of math, where we have like 1 for your affinity mode math and 1 for your attack mode math, We're just taking the average uptime of the affinity and attack mode and then halving them. So then we can just do one nice average calculation here. So 225 base roll, 7% increase thanks to guts and attack 4. Brings us 240.75. We got all the flat increases from Counter-Strike 3, Agitator 2 with the 65% uptime, Burst 1, Attack 4, Adrenaline 1, and then we're taking just +3 from Resonance 1 with 60% assumed uptime. Those values have been halved. So 299.75. Multiply that by the white sharpness, that brings us to 395.6. Then we have 88% reliable affinity from Max Might, Latent 5 with the 66% uptime, Agitator 2 with its assumed uptime, the base Artian Weakness Exploit 1, and then of course Resonance 1 with the 90% uptime with the values halved. So with that 88% reliable affinity, we have 5 crit boost, but 88% of the time getting that benefit, so it's more like a 35.2% damage increase for all our damage. Multiply that by our last number, and that brings us to the whopping 535 effective roll. Obviously, it's worth running if you're going to play with support hunters or other players, which is a pretty cool thing to actually affect the meta. But if you don't have like an ideal talisman roll that doesn't have all these slots, you're just not going to be able to run this. So here's a quick alternative that will have less effective roll. We slap on the Counter-Strike 3 talisman. Then we rejig the armor set to be like this, with the Omega pieces being the helm and the gloves. Then you've got Raydao in Gamma for the chest and waist, and then the Duna in Gamma for the legs. This allows you to slot in decorations like this to achieve this skill list, where we actually gain 1 agitator, and you have a lot more space because the set just comes with quick sheath. This then gives you 3 1 slots to work with and that bonus 2 slot, maybe for stamina surge or something else. It will be less effective raw than the ideal set obviously, but it is a very valid alternative. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the build video for today. Now, obviously, the potential effective raw from the multiplayer set is ridiculous, but I do want to at least acknowledge the fact that it wants you to play around the bonus as much as you can reasonably. Because obviously, while the raw bonus is going, that's 10 raw. That's obviously really important to maximize. But then that red circle is so big, it's very hard to actually avoid people, especially in the context of Omega, where, you know, you're trying to hit the back legs. And so other people are also there trying to do the same thing in your circle. So obviously, perfectly playing around a Omega 2 set is difficult. If doable, clearly more effective raw, a lot more effective raw than the best solo set today. But we think for a lot of people, it's not going to be worth all the effort, which is why we presented all of the different set options today, so you can pick and choose the best thing for you. I hope everything was clear and we gave you all the different advice you might have needed. So please do drop a like, we put a lot of work into it. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.